It all began on a hot Saturday afternoon at Powerhouse Martial Arts Gym, a place that smelled of sweat, leather, and raw determination. The walls were lined with championship belts, faded posters of legendary fighters, and motivational quotes like, "Pain is temporary. Pride is forever." The rhythmic thud of gloves striking heavy bags mixed with the sharp cries of fighters pushing through exhaustion, filling the space with a pulse of focused energy. Near the main sparring ring, Jason stood out as usual, a seasoned black belt. Jason was famous around the gym not only for his flashy spinning kicks, but for his larger-than-life personality. He was a guy who could turn even a routine warm-up into a performance, laughing, joking, and showing off moves that made newcomers' jaws drop. That day, a group of fresh faces had come for a trial class, some in rented gloves, others nervously clutching water bottles and eyeing the ring. Sensing his chance to entertain, Jason began demonstrating a series of flying kicks and complicated combos, each punctuated by a confident grin. Every time his foot snapped through the air, his friends clapped and whistled, their cheers bouncing off the gym's concrete walls. Amid the noise, sitting quietly by the edge of the mat, was Maya. She was in her late 20s, with deep brown skin, short natural curls tied back with a simple black band, and eyes that seemed to observe everything and judge nothing. She had arrived a bit earlier, carrying her own worn gloves and a duffel bag patched with years of use. Maya wasn't unknown at the gym, but she wasn't loud either. Some had seen her train late at night or early in the morning, always alone, always focused. While Jason's movements were wide and flamboyant, hers were sharp, efficient, and precise, almost like she was dancing to music only she could hear. Jason wiped sweat from his brow, and catching sight of Maya, his grin widened. Without a second thought, maybe out of bravado, maybe out of genuine curiosity, he pointed a gloved hand at her. "Hey, you!" he called out, his voice loud enough to hush the nearby conversations. "Wanna spar?" His words hung in the air for a moment. The newcomers exchanged curious looks. Jason's friends smirked, some nudging each other. They expected Maya to smile politely, decline, or look away embarrassed. After all, Jason was a black belt, built like an athlete, with the reputation to match. To them, it was just Jason being Jason, turning even a quiet afternoon into a little show to entertain the crowd and remind everyone why he was a gym star. But instead of shrinking back or laughing along, Maya calmly finished wrapping her wrists. She tightened her gloves, stood up, and looked Jason straight in the eyes. "Sure," she said softly, her voice carrying a quiet strength. "Let's do it." The laughter stopped as suddenly as it had started. Even Jason seemed caught off guard, blinking once before regaining his smile. "All right then," he said, forcing a playful tone as he stepped into the ring. But behind his confident smirk, there was a flicker of surprise, maybe even concern. Maya climbed into the ring without showiness. She moved like someone who belonged there, stepping lightly, rolling her shoulders and checking her stance. She wasn't sizing Jason up as an opponent to crush. She was preparing, centering herself, like a painter pausing before the first stroke. People around the gym drifted closer, curiosity turning to fascination. The newcomers, who had barely finished signing their waivers, pressed closer to the ropes, sensing that this was no ordinary spar. Jason raised his gloves and bounced on his toes, giving a small bow. Maya returned it, her eyes steady. The air felt thicker now, heavy with unspoken challenge, and the question hanging in everyone's minds. Could she really give him a fight? Even Jason's friends, who a minute ago had been chuckling, were silent. In that moment, they weren't sure anymore if this was going to be funny. Maya's calm was unsettling in its own way. It wasn't defiance. It wasn't arrogance. It was something deeper, something that spoke of quiet hours spent training when no one was watching. The coach stepped forward, glanced at both fighters, and signaled to start. The bell hadn't even rung yet, but the gym already felt different. For Jason, it had started as a light-hearted joke, a moment entertained, and maybe show off. But as he met Maya's gaze, unwavering and patient, he felt the familiar heat of adrenaline rise in his chest, mixing with an unexpected sliver of respect. And for everyone watching, it became clear. This wasn't going to be about who could throw the flashiest kick or who had the loudest cheer. This was about something real. In that single moment, when Maya simply said, "Sure, let's do it." The laughter died, and electric anticipation took its place. The entire gym held its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. The two stepped into the ring, the battered blue mat soft underfoot, ropes creaking as they ducked through. The ceiling fan spun lazily overhead, barely moving the warm air heavy with sweat and anticipation. Around them, the gym crowd pressed closer, the hum of conversation fading into an expectant silence. Jason bounced on his toes, shoulders loose, gloves tapping together. His eyes flicked to the side, catching the amused grins of his friends. "This'll be quick," he muttered under his breath, loud enough for the front row to hear. His voice carried a familiar mix of humor and bravado that usually got people laughing. But today, no one laughed. Across from him, Maya stood almost completely still. Her stance was balanced but relaxed, gloves up, elbows tucked in. She didn't look nervous or angry. Her gaze never wavered, locked on Jason with an intensity that was unsettling because it was so calm. It wasn't the stare of someone desperate to prove herself. It was the quiet focus of someone who knew exactly why she was there. The coach stepped between them, gave the briefest nod, and the bell rang. Jason moved first. He circled to his left, testing her reactions. His first two jabs were quick, light, more playful than threatening. Maya barely seemed to move, but somehow the punches missed. She leaned back just enough, like water flowing around a rock. Jason chuckled, sweat already beading on his forehead. "All right, okay," he murmured, louder now, trying to keep it playful. He threw another jab, this time feigning high, and shifted his weight for a playful roundhouse kick aimed at her side. But before the kick had fully extended, Maya stepped to the outside, pivoted, and flicked a short, sharp punch into his ribs. It wasn't a heavy blow, but it was fast, precise, and deliberate, enough to make Jason's breath catch for a second. The reaction in the gym was immediate. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. The rhythmic thuds on the heavy bag slowed, then stopped completely. One by one, people turned to watch, not because they thought Jason was in trouble yet, but because, for the first time, it looked like maybe he should be paying attention. Jason's smirk faltered just a fraction. He lifted his gloves a little higher and adjusted his stance. He was still trying to play it cool, but something about Maya's effortless counter made it clear this wasn't the spar he'd expected. Maya didn't advance. She just waited, balanced, watching him, every muscle ready but relaxed. Her breathing was steady, controlled, almost like she'd been here 1,000 times before. Jason exhaled sharply, now throwing a quicker combo, a jab, cross, and hook. His gloves blurred in the air, the sound of leather slicing through space. Maya blocked the first two strikes, then leaned under the hook, pivoting around him so fluidly that Jason had to turn awkwardly to face her again. A soft murmur rippled through the onlookers. The newcomers stared wide-eyed. Even Jason's friends, who'd started this round laughing, had fallen silent. Frustration sparked behind Jason's eyes. He bounced again, tried to throw another kick, this one a little harder, faster, aiming to rattle her guard. But Maya was already moving, stepping just outside its reach, her eyes never leaving his. Jason felt his foot land in empty air, the momentum pulling him slightly off balance. In that split second, Maya closed the distance. She didn't swing wildly. Instead, she delivered a single, short punch to his shoulder, a reminder, not a knockout punch, but one that forced him to reset. The hush in the gym deepened. It wasn't that Maya was overpowering Jason with strength. It was how she made it look effortless. Every move had a purpose. Every slip and counter precise and economical. It was a discipline of countless quiet hours of practice, now revealed under the harsh fluorescent lights. Jason's friends exchanged nervous glances. Some of the newcomers leaned so close to the ropes they almost fell into the ring. It had started as something to film for Instagram, a funny clip of Jason teasing a quiet woman in the gym. But it wasn't funny anymore. Jason, breathing harder now, tried to regain control. He threw a sharper kick, his heel whistling inches from Maya's guard. Maya shifted her weight, caught his rhythm, and this time stepped in close, her presence pressing into his space. Jason froze for half a heartbeat. long enough for her to touch his side again with a gloved fist. Just a tap, but the meaning behind it echoed louder than any punch. Jason backed up, chest heaving, sweat dripping down his temple. His grin was gone now, replaced by something like realization and respect. Around them, the entire gym felt the change. No one spoke. Even the clanking of weights had stopped. The tension hummed in the air, thick enough to taste. It wasn't a show anymore. It wasn't a joke. This was real. And for the first time in that crowded, noisy gym, everyone understood they weren't watching Jason teach Maya a lesson. They were watching Maya teach everyone what quiet strength truly looked like. Jason's smile faded. The playful sparkle that had danced in his eyes a moment ago was gone, replaced by a steely focus. His cheeks were flushed, not just from exertion, but from the raw sting of being caught off guard, especially in front of a crowd that had expected him to dominate. He raised his guard higher, gloves tighter around his face, and exhaled through clenched teeth. His pride was now fully on the line, and he wasn't about to let this slip without fighting back. With a sharp step forward, Jason unleashed a quick, powerful combo, a jab to test the distance, followed by a cross, then a hook aimed to catch Maya off guard. The punches sliced through the air, a blur of practiced precision. The crowd tensed, expecting impact. But Maya moved like wind around stone. She didn't retreat. She shifted her weight, slipping just outside the arc of his hook. Then, in one graceful motion, she pivoted and swept his lead leg from under him. Jason's feet left the mat, and he crashed down with a muffled thud that seemed to echo across the now silent gym. A collective gasp erupted. For a heartbeat, everything froze. The sight of Jason, the black belt, the gym showman, sprawled on the mat was something no one had imagined seeing when this spar began. Jason scrambled to his feet, cheeks burning crimson. His breath came faster now, chest rising and falling under the sweat-drenched fabric of his rash guard. He glanced quickly at his friends, who avoided his eyes, suddenly very still. The playful confidence that had carried him moments ago felt distant, replaced by a dawning respect, and something else, uncertainty. Across from him, Maya stood balanced, gloves still up, breathing steady and calm. She didn't say a word. She didn't so much as blink in triumph. Her focus remained razor-sharp, her posture unchanged, ready, patient, respectful. They circled each other, the space between them heavy with unspoken realization. Jason lunged again, trying to force her back, using sheer speed and strength to overwhelm her. But every time, Maya was there, blocking, slipping, stepping aside. Her counters weren't wild or flashy. They were calculated, measured, a jab here, a low kick there, each one a quiet reminder that she was in control. What struck everyone watching wasn't just that Maya was winning exchanges. It was how she was doing it. Jason fought with bursts of aggression, fueled by frustration and pride. Maya, in contrast, fought with an almost meditative calm. Her breathing stayed slow and steady. Her eyes never wavered. It was as though she wasn't fighting Jason himself, but dancing around his mistakes, turning his power back onto him. Each failed attack wore Jason down. Sweat streamed into his eyes. His footwork grew heavier, punches a fraction slower. Maya's footwork, by contrast, remained light and sure, her steps quiet on the mat. She barely seemed to tire, as if she trained for this exact moment over countless silent hours. They exchanged blows again, Jason managing a glancing hook across her shoulder, but Maya immediately answered with a quick punch to his ribs, forcing him back. The sound of glove against body felt louder in the hushed gym. By the end of the second round, something had shifted. The crowd sensed it, felt it deep in their bones. This wasn't about Jason showing off anymore. His eyes said it all. What started as a playful test had turned into a real fight for respect. And, in a way, for survival. Jason's style, once proud and commanding, was now reactive. He wasn't leading the dance. He was trying to keep up. His breaths came rough and ragged, sweat dripping from his brow, matting his hair. And across from him, Maya still stood, quiet, collected, unshaken. There was no trace of arrogance in her posture, no gloating, no taunting words. She let her skill do all the speaking, and it spoke louder than any boast could have. Spectators who had once smirked at the idea of Maya sparring Jason were now silent, watching every move with held breath. Newcomers clung to the ropes, eyes wide, while Jason's closest friends found themselves unsure whether to cheer or simply watch in awe. Jason's attacks grew less frequent, more cautious. Every punch and kick carried the weight of doubt. Will this land, or will she slip past it again? And each time Maya answered, not by overpowering him, but by outthinking him, outmoving him, and refusing to be intimidated. In those final moments of the round, it became clear to everyone watching. Maya wasn't here to humiliate Jason or prove she was better. She was here to fight well, to fight smart, to honor the art itself. Her calm wasn't coldness. It was respect for her opponent, for the gym, and for the discipline she had practiced for so long in silence. When the bell finally rang, the two lowered their gloves. Jason, chest heaving, sweat dripping from every pore, met Maya's eyes, and what he saw wasn't triumph, but quiet respect. In that look, everyone saw it too. Maya wasn't someone to be underestimated. And what silenced the gym wasn't just her technique. It was a quiet, undeniable truth that true strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's found in calm eyes, steady breath, and the courage to keep standing firm, no matter who stands across from you. Then it happened, the moment everyone in the gym had unknowingly been waiting for. Jason, cheeks flushed, sweat dripping from his brow, felt a desperate rush of adrenaline surge through him one last time. His breath came in ragged gasps, chest heaving under the weight of fatigue and pride. He knew this was it, the moment to reclaim control, to remind everyone, and maybe himself, why it had always been a name whispered with respect in this gym. He planted his foot, turned his hips, and launched into his signature move, a spinning back kick so sharp and sudden it usually caught even the sharpest fighters by surprise. For years, this kick had been Jason's finishing touch, the exclamation mark at the end of every sparring session. The air whistled around his foot as it cut its lethal arc, the entire gym almost leaning forward as one, caught in the tension of that spinning motion. But Maya didn't flinch. To anyone watching, it was like time slowed down. Jason's kick, full of force and frustration, sailed dangerously close, but Maya had already moved. A subtle pivot, weight shifting smoothly onto her back leg, body turning just enough so that Jason's heel cut through nothing but empty space. Before the spectators could even process what happened, Maya's gloved hand snapped forward, a swift, clean punch that buried itself in Jason's midsection. The impact wasn't a wild haymaker. It was precise and deliberate, but powerful enough that the echo of glove meeting flesh seemed to bounce off the walls. Jason's eyes widened, all the breath leaving his lungs in a single, stunned gasp. His body folded forward involuntarily, and he dropped to his knees on a mat, gloves falling to catch his weight. Sweat dripped from his face to the floor below, mixing with the droplets already scattered around the ring. And then silence, real silence. No one spoke. Even the heavy bags, which usually swayed lazily, seemed perfectly still. The clang of weights, the squeak of sneakers on rubber mats, all of it stopped, replaced only by the sharp, stuttering sound of Jason trying to draw breath back into his empty lungs. A few seconds felt like an eternity. Time stretched painfully thin as everyone, from newcomers to Jason's own closest friends, simply watched. This wasn't what they had expected. It wasn't supposed to end like this. Slowly, Jason lifted his gaze, still catching his breath, and looked up at Maya. What he saw wasn't a smirk, wasn't triumph, and certainly wasn't mockery. Maya stood there, gloves still raised out of respect, her breathing steady and calm. Her eyes held something softer, understanding perhaps, or quiet acknowledgement. She had beaten him, yes, but not to embarrass, humiliate, or diminish. Instead, she offered him a gloved hand, her arm steady, her expression open and sincere. Jason hesitated, chest still aching, pride still bruised. But then something shifted in his face, a softening of the eyes, the smallest nod of acceptance. He reached out, gripped her glove, and let her help him back to his feet. The crowd around the ring exhaled collectively, as though they'd been holding their breath for minutes. Some looked stunned, others almost inspired. A few newcomers, who had barely learned to wrap their hands properly, found themselves understanding something deeper than technique or power, because it became clear in that quiet moment that Maya hadn't just won a sparring match. What she had shown everyone was infinitely bigger. She had fought without anger, without the need to prove herself through arrogance or noise. Her victory hadn't come from brute strength, but from control, patience, and a deep respect for the art she practiced. Even at her most dominant moment, standing over her winded opponent, she chose respect instead of ridicule. Jason, still steadying his breath, lowered his gloves fully now. His shoulders relaxed, and in his eyes you could see a reluctant but genuine gratitude. The fight had humbled him, but it had also taught him. Maya nodded a small, almost imperceptible nod that spoke volumes. Thank you for fight. Thank you for testing me. Thank you for understanding. The energy in the gym changed. Where there had been laughter and teasing before, there was now a quiet respect, even awe. Maya had entered the ring as the quiet woman on the sidelines. She stepped out as something else entirely, a reminder that true martial arts isn't about flashy finishes, loud mouths, or proving someone wrong. It's about the discipline to remain calm under pressure, the humility to respect your opponent, and the quiet confidence that doesn't need to be shouted to be felt. Later, as the crowd began to disperse, Jason sat at the edge of the mat, wiping sweat from his face. He watched Maya packing her gloves into her old duffel bag, without the roar of a crowd or dramatic music. Something profound had happened between them. An unspoken understanding forged not through words, but through movement, struggle, and shared respect. And as stories of the spar spread around the gym, told in hushed voices and wide-eyed recounting, everyone who heard it learned the same lesson. Sometimes, strength speaks loudest when it isn't loud at all. In the end, Maya didn't just silence Jason. She silenced the entire gym, not with force, but with the undeniable power of quiet mastery. And that, more than any knockout or flashy move, was what truly left everyone speechless. After the spar, Jason sat at the edge of the mat, shoulders hunched and chest still rising and falling with every ragged breath. Sweat dripped steadily from his face, darkening the mat beneath him. His gloves hung loosely by his sides now, his gaze unfocused as if replaying every moment of the fight in slow motion. For a moment, he stayed there in silence, the hum of the gym starting to return around him. Then he lifted his head and looked at Maya, who was calmly unwrapping her hands nearby. Their eyes met, not as rivals, not as strangers, but as martial artists who had truly seen each other. "You're incredible," Jason said, his voice low, stripped of bravado, carrying a sincerity that didn't need to be loud or be heard. Maya paused, her expression softening into a gentle smile. "Thanks," she replied. "It's not about fighting harder. It's about fighting smarter and knowing when not to fight at all." The words, spoken simply, hung in the air. Nearby, a few people who had been watching closely exchanged looks. It wasn't flashy wisdom or a grand speech, but it resonated deeper than anything louder could have. Word about the spar spread through the gym like wildfire. By the next day, even those who hadn't witnessed it in person spoke of it as if they had. Stories flowed between trainers, students, and newcomers, each retelling slightly different, but at the heart of them all was the same quiet, powerful truth. The woman everyone thought might back down had stepped forward, stayed calm, and changed everything. People who normally wouldn't have noticed Maya now approached her between classes. Some offered shy handshakes. Others asked questions about her training, wanting to learn from her approach. A few simply thanked her, saying they'd been inspired to train with more patience, or to believe that strength wasn't always about who could shout the loudest. Maya handled it all with the same quiet humility she had shown in the ring. She didn't start teaching classes or giving lectures. She just kept training, early mornings and late evenings, sometimes alone, sometimes with a partner, always focused. Jason, to his credit, didn't let pride turn the lesson into bitterness. Instead, something shifted inside him. Where once he might have leaned into showing off for laughs or chasing the biggest crowd, now he turned inward, training harder, digging into fundamentals, and rethinking what it meant to truly master his craft. In the weeks that followed, the two sparred again, not as opponents locked in silent rivalry, but as equals. Jason discovered that sparring with Maya wasn't about winning or losing anymore. It was about learning, testing boundaries, and respecting the invisible line between aggression and control. Their sessions drew quiet crowds. People didn't gather to see knockouts or dramatic finishes anymore. They came to watch something deeper. They saw two fighters moving around each other like chess players, reading each breath, each step, each faint shift of weight, in a dance that spoke of discipline, trust, and respect. The gym itself began to change, too. The story of that afternoon became a sort of legend told to newcomers. How Jason, the black belt everyone thought unbeatable, had asked Maya to spar as a joke, and how she'd answered not with anger, but with skill, calm, and quiet confidence that silenced the whole gym. Over time, it became more than a story. It became a lesson woven into the very floor of the mat. That martial arts isn't about who can yell the loudest, who can kick the highest, or who walks in with the flashiest belt. It's about the courage to step forward when you're underestimated, the patience to wait for the right moment, and the grace to help your opponent back up, even when you had every reason to gloat. Some nights, Jason and Maya stayed late after the gym emptied, gloves off, talking quietly in the corner. Jason spoke about the pressure he'd always felt to keep performing, to be the face everyone expected. Maya shared stories of training in silence, fighting doubt, and the struggle being seen as less before even throwing a single punch. They realized that, in their different ways, they had both carried invisible weight. And in that ring, for a few moments, they had helped each other let it go. New members continued to arrive, each hearing the story not just as entertainment, but as a reminder of what truly matters. And longtime members found themselves sparring a bit differently, more thoughtful, more measured, and with a new respect for quiet fighters who might once have been overlooked. In the end, Maya hadn't just won a fight. She changed something deeper. She changed how everyone in that gym understood strength. Not as force or volume, but as quiet mastery, patience, and humility. And though the noise of training soon returned, the slamming of pads, the shouts of encouragement, the sharp snap of kicks, something about the gym remained quieter in spirit. A kind of reverence settled in the walls. Because Maya didn't just silence Jason. She silenced doubt, pride, and assumptions. And what truly remained wasn't the echo of punches or cheers, but the quiet respect that lasted long after the final bell.